This Congress is critical for us because it is important that we all agree upon certain standards that all nations, all countries across the world must adhere to. And that standard setting is only possible when we talk to each other and agree on them. Clearly, there are different standards in different countries at the moment. And there is also an increasing move to move towards more punitive action for children, which is another very worrying trend that we are noticing and which is particularly true in my country. So the need to balance public security and address the inherent fear of public in the public and ensure their security, balance it with children's rights and balance it with the rights of victims. That's one of the critical areas of discussion that needs to be taken forward. There are several other areas, of course, that are important too. One of them is what we just finished discussing here on the fact that there is so little money invested in implementing juvenile justice. Because there is not enough resources on implementing juvenile justice, we see the poor standards. So even if there is a law, the implementation remains poor because there is no infrastructure, there is not enough trained personnel. So the importance of that is very important. Importance of investing resources in capacity building, in human resources, in financial resources, and that brings us to political priorities. How do we make children's issues a political priority amongst countries? How do we make states see children as full-fledged citizens of their country, and therefore they, even though they may or may not have a voice, how do we ensure that they do have a voice? Following this within the juvenile justice system brings us to the question of how do we ensure that children are heard within the juvenile justice system? How do we make sure that we create spaces and environment within which children can voice themselves, can talk about themselves? And a question that then comes is: do we always need lawyers? Do we need someone to speak up for them? Can we not have a system of juvenile justice where children can speak up without fear? So the system is for them rather than the system just to protect society. So we have to invert it. We have to invert the thinking around juvenile justice. We have to protect society. We have to create a secure society. But at the same time, we have to make children feel that they're part of that society and make them part of protecting the society. And then perhaps the offending will go down. The more we make it punitive, the more we make detention the first resort. What we are going to have is what we have today: increasing violence by children, against children, because violence against children makes them violent when they grow up. So these are very critical questions that need to be addressed. One of the questions that has been increasingly discussed amongst people but has not come up in a big way is: do we need specialized cadres of lawyers, and do we need a special cadre of judges and police? Now, here there is a concern, because if we're talking about police, which is only for juvenile justice or for children, then they feel they are limited in their role, and their promotions in the future gets limited. And therefore, then the same thing happens with judges. They become caught in a box in their own roles as just juvenile justice or youth magistrates. They feel limited by the role that they have to perform, and they feel limited in their advancement in the career. So it becomes therefore critical to ensure that all judges and all police and all those involved in looking after children are actually trained, and capacity building is invested in a big way. The terminologies that we use needs to become standardized, because some people are talking about minors, some people are talking about children, some people are talking about juvenile offenders. There's some people who are talking about young adult offenders. Now, which category of children are we all talking about? And this is going to confuse the governments when they make laws, and which we are insisting again on standardizing. So there are some things that we need to agree upon as we move along in this debate. I'm coming from a country in which there's a huge debate around juvenile justice, just as I'm speaking, and in which a very good law. We really had a very good law, which was perhaps one of the best in the world, which had a preventive aspect to it as well as a curative aspect to it. Because our law on juvenile justice is about care and protection and about children in conflict, dealing with children in conflict with law. But as I speak, there is a debate and in the country because the government of India is moving towards lowering the age for children between the age of 16 to 18 and putting them into the adult system in case of certain kind of offences and serious offences, which means it's already thinking of lowering standards. And if India, which is a large and powerful country in many ways, does that, many other countries might follow, and that would be a regressive measure. So so while I am optimistic, because when so many people's energies come together, you have to be optimistic. But at the same time, I worry because sometimes you think, how many steps have we taken forward, and then why do we, and then take a few steps backwards, and then the journey becomes that much more difficult. I am increasingly finding that in the human rights debate, human rights of one set of people is being pitted against human rights of another set of people. For example, in this case, it's women's security versus child rights. And it need not be so. This is true of a number of human rights and a number of different kinds of people and their human rights. But in this particular case, it's women's security or girls' security versus that of the rights of the juvenile offender or the rights of the child who is offended. But that need not be so. We should be able to ensure that the rights of women and children are protected, and they are protected, and they are not subjected to abuse and exploitation. And at the same time, we are able to protect the rights of the offender. Why should it be one against the other or one versus the other? It should be both. And that is a big challenge today for us in the juvenile justice sector, for all of us who work in the juvenile justice sector, because that is what the government is coming and telling us, or people who are against juvenile justice will tell you, how do you protect the girls? Do you know this boy is such a bad offender, he's a rapist, what do you do with him? And you say, no, but the idea is, as Renate Winter said yesterday, to move to responsibility. It is about getting children to take responsibility for their actions and then helping them to move forward from there, and not to make it guilty, make them feel guilty and therefore punitive action for the guilt. So there's a difference. The making them take responsibility for their action is an important part of the journey that we make the child take. Restorative justice is a right path to take, it, yes, but perhaps it is not going to be, we're not all prepared for it. All countries or all societies are not prepared for it. It is not like about just breaking a chair. If you break a chair, or I break a window, or a child breaks a window, or just steals a mobile, it's very different from, say, an offense like murder or rape or something even armed robbery or or a terrorist act. So we probably will have to evolve mechanisms to deal with such things in the restorative justice model. We've not quite reached there, but I'm sure we can make that journey. And while making that journey, we will have to come up with solutions that are progressive. It cannot be all in one go. We'll not reach there all in one go. We have to take baby steps, and what are those baby steps that we must take is something we need to all discuss and think together.